The starter motor clicked once, then nothing. Jake Henderson turned the key again on his Farmall H tractor. Another pathetic click echoed across the farmyard. It was 6:30 on a July morning in 1947, central Iowa, and the thermometer already read 78 degrees. "Come on, you stubborn piece of iron," Jake muttered, climbing down from the seat. Yesterday, this tractor had plowed until sunset without missing a beat. Now it acted like it had never run a day in its life. His father, Tom, walked over from the milk house, wiping his hands on a rag. He didn't say anything at first, just looked at the cloudless sky turning pale blue in the east. The weather radio had been clear, rain coming Thursday, maybe storms. It was Monday morning, and they had 200 acres of wheat standing golden and ready in the fields. Every farm in 3 counties would be racing to get their harvest in before those clouds rolled over the horizon. "Battery?" Tom asked. "Full charge." Tested it twice. Jake kicked the massive rear tire in frustration. Everything was perfect yesterday. Tom reached into the engine compartment and laid his palm flat against the starter motor housing. Already warm, and the sun had barely cleared the tree line. He'd seen this before. Summer of '39, during that brutal heat wave when temperatures stayed above 95 for 43 straight days. Half the tractors in the county had refused to start during afternoon heat, and the other half were temperamental as hell. "What's the forecast for today?" Tom asked. 98 degrees by noon. Tom nodded slowly, his weathered face creasing into a slight frown. "That's what I figured. Metal expands when it gets hot, son. And different metals expand at different rates. You've got copper windings inside that starter motor, wrapped around an iron core. When it gets hot enough, the copper expands faster than the iron and everything binds up inside." Jake stared at him. "The engineers at International Harvester didn't account for hot weather? They accounted for normal hot weather. They didn't account for heat waves and farmers running equipment 16 hours a day in temperatures nobody expected when they designed this thing back in '39. Tom glanced toward the wheat fields. "Right now we're burning daylight. Every hour we're not cutting is an hour closer to that rain. And if we lose this crop to weather, we're not making the mortgage payment this year." The Henderson farm had purchased this Farmall H in 1944 with money borrowed against future wheat sales. The note was due in September. The wheat standing in their fields represented not just a year's income, but their ability to keep the land that had been in the family since 1887. No pressure. "So what do we do?" Jake asked. "Wait for it to cool down. That could take hours. Not if you know the trick." Tom walked to the stock tank behind the barn and came back carrying a bucket of cool well water. Without hesitation, he dumped the entire thing over the starter motor housing. "Dad, you're going to short out the electrical. Get in the seat and turn the key." Jake climbed up, convinced this was going to make things worse. He turned the key. The starter motor engaged immediately with a healthy grinding sound, and the 4-cylinder engine roared to life. Black smoke puffed from the exhaust stack, then cleared as the engine settled into its familiar rhythm. "I'll be damned," Jake said over the engine noise. Tom climbed up on the running board so Jake could hear him. An old mechanic named Walter Briggs at the Case dealership in Des Moines figured this out in '39. He'd been in the Army Motor Transport Corps during World War I, worked on trucks down on the Mexican border in desert heat. Saw the same problem with military starter motors. The solution is simple. Cool the metal quickly and it contracts back to proper tolerances. But here's what you need to understand, because this isn't a one-time fix. Tom explained the morning routine that would become Jake's life for the next 6 weeks. Park the tractor in shade overnight, north side of the barn where it stays coolest. Carry a bucket of water in the field at all times. At the first sign of hesitation when starting, cool that starter motor before the problem gets worse. Never let the tractor sit shut off during the hottest part of the day unless absolutely necessary. And most important, start your workday at 5 in the morning and push hard until 11. Shelter during peak heat, then finish the day in the evening cool. "Walter told me something else," Tom said as Jake throttled down the engine. "He said these tractors were designed for maybe 10 years of service. We're in year 3 with this one, but we're running it harder than the engineers ever imagined. Normal wear plus extreme heat equals failure at the worst possible time. The farmers who understand that are the ones who get their crops in. The ones who don't end up watching their wheat rot in the fields while they wait for replacement parts that might not arrive for weeks. Jake spent the rest of that Monday learning thermal management the hard way. He started cutting wheat at 5:15 in the morning, while dew still clung to the grain heads. The Farmall H pulled the binder through row after row of standing wheat, the sickle bar chattering as it sliced through stalks, the canvas conveyor carrying cut grain up to the binding mechanism. By 11 o'clock, with the sun hammering down and heat waves shimmering over the stubble fields, Jake could feel the difference in how the tractor responded. Slight hesitation when he engaged the power takeoff, a fractional delay in throttle response. He shut down under the windbreak trees on the north property line, dumped a bucket of water over the starter motor, and waited out the worst heat. The thermometer on the barn read 96 degrees at 1:30. Jake ate his lunch in the tractor's shadow and watched the western sky for any sign of those Thursday storms coming early. At 3 o'clock, with temperature dropping to 92, he fired up the Farmall again and pushed through until dark. 18 acres cut that first day. He needed to average 30 acres daily to finish before the rain. Tuesday started the same way. 5 in the morning, water bucket ready, systematic progress through the wheat fields. But at 10:15, with outside temperature already at 91 degrees, Jake shut down to grease the binder's knife sections. When he tried to restart 15 minutes later, the starter motor gave that telltale hesitant click before catching. Warning sign. He cooled it with water, made a mental note, and kept working. But now he understood what his father meant about learning the machine's limits. That sound, that fractional delay in engagement, was the starter motor telling him it was approaching its thermal threshold. By Wednesday, Jake had developed an almost intuitive sense of when the starter needed cooling. The pitch of the grinding sound when the engine caught, the feel of the key turning, the ambient temperature combined with how long the tractor had been running. He was no longer just operating a machine, he was managing a complex system of thermal stresses, mechanical tolerances, and time pressure. Wednesday night, the weather radio updated its forecast. Storms now expected Thursday morning, possibly severe. Jake had cut 92 acres. He had 108 to go. "We're not going to make it," Jake said at supper, exhaustion making his voice flat. Tom set down his coffee cup. Raymond Kowalski stopped by the feed store this afternoon. He lost his whole south field today, 80 acres. Tractor wouldn't start this morning. He didn't know the cooling trick. Waited 4 hours for it to cool naturally. By the time he got running, he'd lost half a day. Then his binder jammed twice in the afternoon heat because he was pushing too hard trying to make up time. Jake looked up. 80 acres? Gone. He's got wheat still standing and rain coming tomorrow. Tom leaned back in his chair. I told him about the water cooling. He's going to try to salvage what he can tomorrow morning before the storms hit. But the point is, son, you're ahead of where most farmers are right now. You've been managing this heat intelligently since Monday. That puts you in position to finish. Jake was back in the fields at 4:30 Thursday morning, working by the glow of the tractor's headlights until sunrise. The western sky showed a dark line on the horizon by 7 o'clock. Clouds building. He pushed the Farmall harder than he'd dared all week, letting the engine temperature climb higher, taking shorter breaks, gambling that he could finish before either the weather or the machinery failed. At 11:15 Thursday morning, Jake cut the last row of wheat on the Henderson Farms south field. Total acreage, 208 acres, all harvested in 3.5 days of brutal heat. He shut down the Farmall H and climbed off, legs shaking from tension and exhaustion. The western sky was dark grey now, lightning flickering in the distance. He could smell rain coming on the wind. Tom drove up in the pickup truck, got out, and surveyed the fields of cut wheat bundled and ready for threshing. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching those storm clouds roll closer. Your grandfather bought this land in 1887, Tom finally said. 60 years we've been working this dirt. Some years good, some years hard, but we're still here. He turned to look at Jake. Because we learn, we adapt. We figure out what works and we do it, even when it's not in any manual or guidebook. That's what keeps a farm going. The first raindrops started falling at noon. By 12:30, it was a downpour. Jake and Tom sat in the barn, watching water stream off the roof, listening to thunder roll across the Iowa prairie, Their wheat was safe, cut, bundled, under cover. The mortgage payment was secure. Raymond Kowalski managed to salvage 42 acres before the rain hit. The rest of his wheat, 38 acres worth, was still standing when the storms came through. Heavy rain and hail flattened it into the mud. Total loss. Jake heard about it Saturday morning at the feed store in town. Raymond was there looking tired and defeated, figuring out how to make his mortgage payment with half a crop. Jake walked over to him. "My dad showed me the water cooling trick on Monday," Jake said. "I should have come by your place and told you about it sooner. I'm sorry." Raymond shook his head. "Not your fault, this is farming. Some years everything works, some years it doesn't." He managed a thin smile. "But I'd appreciate it if you'd show me that cooling technique for next summer. I've got a feeling we haven't seen the last of these heat waves." That Saturday morning at the feed store became an impromptu workshop. Jake demonstrated the starter motor cooling method on a tractor parked behind the building. 8 farmers gathered around asking questions, sharing their own experiences with heat-related equipment failures. By noon, knowledge that had saved the Henderson Farms harvest was spreading through the community. Word traveled to other towns, other counties. Farmers talked to mechanics. Mechanics talked to equipment dealers. Dealers sent reports back to manufacturers in Chicago and Moline and Minneapolis. By the early 1950s, every major tractor company had redesigned their starter motors with heat-resistant materials and better tolerances to handle thermal expansion. The problem that plagued thousands of farms in the summers of 47, 48, and 49 was gradually engineered out of existence. But Jake Henderson never forgot that July week in 1947. The lesson wasn't really about starter motors or thermal expansion or cooling techniques. It was about understanding that machinery has limits, that extreme conditions reveal weaknesses, and that the difference between success and failure often comes down to knowledge applied at the critical moment. He kept that Farmel H running on the family farm until 1972, 28 years of service. And every summer, from May through September, a coffee can full of cool well water sat mounted on the tractor's toolbox, just in case. Because preparation beats panic every single time. The coffee can is still there. The tractor sits in a collector's barn now, restored to museum condition, painted perfect International Harvester red. But that dented coffee can remains bolted to the toolbox, a small reminder of the summer when knowing one simple trick made the difference between saving a harvest and losing a farm. Thanks for watching this piece of American farming history. If you found this story valuable, please hit that subscribe button and give us a like. Share this video with anyone interested in agricultural heritage, vintage tractors, or the practical wisdom that kept American farms running through decades of challenges. Your support helps us continue preserving these important stories from rural America. This video is inspired by real events from American farming history during the 1930s through 1970s. While efforts have been made to ensure historical and technical accuracy, this content is meant for educational and entertainment purposes and is not intended to represent or offend any individual or group. Jake Henderson is a representative character, reflecting the experiences of hundreds of American farmers who faced similar challenges with thermal expansion in tractor starter motors during extreme heat conditions in this era.